Sorry. Okay, here we are. Good to be with you again. Sorry I couldn't make it last time. It was just impossible. But here we are, continuing with our look at the way we can argue for God's existence without using scripture for people who have no faith, and we can't get them to look at the Bible because they just see it as mythology. And so we've been looking at these various arguments from the first cause. There's got to be a first cause of everything. There's got to be an unchanged being that causes change in the universe, for there to be change. And the whole question about why we are moral, why we have this moral innate sense within us, as another argument. And there are many more. There are about 20 good, reasonably good arguments for the existence of God, some better than others. And they're all like the links, threads that you twist together. Each one might be breakable in itself, although the stronger ones are not, I would say. But when you twist them all together, all these 20 arguments, they become unbreakable. They're all pointing the same direction. And when you are open to them, then I think it's almost impossible not to come to a knowledge of God. And that's what the Catholic Church would maintain, that we can come to a knowledge of God, a certain knowledge that God exists, by the use just of human reason, which is what all this process is about, using our human reason, looking at the universe, seeing how it works, seeing the everyday reality of the universe, and seeing that these things point to God. The Bible says these things too. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The firmament shows forth the work of his hands. That's the Bible saying, look at the universe. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. You look at the heavens, and they are proclaiming God to you. Where have they come from? There must be a cause bringing them into existence, a first cause. And St. Paul is of the same mind when he says the whole way the universe works points to God. He says that in the letter to the Romans. I think it's chapter 1 or chapter 2. But for a Frenchman of the 18th century, Blaise Pascal, he is of the opinion that all these proofs of the existence of God are far too complicated for the ordinary person to understand. I would argue against that. But he has a different approach to bringing somebody to God. And many people believe that it's perhaps the most powerful way of bringing present-day pagans to belief in God. And it's called Pascal's wager, or bet, like betting on horses and that sort of thing. It's that sort of betting. And he lays down this wager before the person who does not believe. It's the whole point of this argument. But just a few words about his life, first of all. Catholic, but he lived and he was brought up with a very good education by a very wise and loving father. One of his sisters became a nun, but a Jansenist. And I won't talk about Jansenism, but it was a heresy in the church in the 18th century. And she was a nun who would subscribe to this heresy within the Catholic Church, and it had to get sorted out. And ultimately it was. But Pascal himself was not a Jansenist. He did not subscribe to that heresy. And it's not a very important part of his life. That whole issue is not, it is not significant in his life, as it was in his sister's, I suppose. For most of his youth and early manhood, he lived a life alienated from the church. And he was a scientist, and he pursued a scientific career. And he invented what was the first computer, which was a sophisticated counting machine. He also invented the first vacuum cleaner. So he was he was a genius from a scientific point of view. And when computer programming began, and could people just be quiet, please, while I'm talking? When computer programming began in the 20th century, one of the programs that was developed was named after him. It's called Pascal. And because of his scientific work, he obviously became quite famous and was invited to all the fashionable gatherings in Paris and became quite a celebrity. And he was leading a very happy, fulfilled life from a worldly point of view, but he wasn't practicing his faith. However, one night, driving home from one of these gatherings in Paris to his house outside Paris in a horse-drawn carriage that he was driving himself, as he drove over a bridge, one of the horses he was controlling bolted and broke the connection with the carriage he was driving and catapulted Blaise Pascal out of the carriage into the river that was underneath the bridge that he was driving over. He very nearly died, but by the grace of God, he emerged unscathed from the encounter. And the whole encounter made him think about changing. It made him change his life completely, threw his life upside down. And he began thinking seriously about the meaning of human life and the human condition, which we all share. And not surprisingly, he returned rapidly to a fervent practice of his faith because death had confronted him very dramatically. And he determined to write an account of his faith for everyone. And he thought he'd begin by writing down his thoughts. And he began writing them down as they came to him during the day, as the beginning of this book. And these thoughts were collected together after he died in his 30s after a long and painful illness. And after his death, his friends collected these thoughts together and they published them in a book called Pensées, which is the French for thoughts. And basically, the Pensées begin by outlining the tragedy of the human condition. Pascal says we have such gifts showered on us of intellect and will and memory, and yet we have to die. And the reality of this, and we see the reality of this in everything in life, that everything in life is tragic. And, or as Pascal put it, vain. It's all vanity, like the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes. He begins by saying, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And Pascal agreed with him totally. He would look at human justice, our attempt to find justice in this life and have courts where people go to find justice. He would say that's vain. Human reasoning on its own just goes round and round in circles, never gets anywhere, and again is vain. And philosophy is vain. Everything is vain, because these ways of operation and thinking, they can't solve the problem of death. And he said, we are alone in this vast, lonely cosmos on this planet Earth, with death facing us at any moment. That's the tragedy of the human condition, if we look at it coldly, which he did. And in order to, because it's such a tragic situation that we're all in, what do? We become obsessed with ourselves and try to cope with the reality of death, either in one of two ways, he said, by either becoming absorbed in diversions, which we see all around us, that people are constantly absorbed in hobbies and pursuing careers and going on holiday, driving cars, reading books, anything to distract us from the reality of death. So we are absorbed in diversions. So we can either react to our tragedy in that way, or we can just be indifferent. We live in an indifferent way. Who cares? Laugh at the whole situation. Other people cope with it in that way. Who cares? And we see all that around us as well. So what is the way out of this tragedy? Pascal says he can show us out of the way of this tragedy. So, I mean, he would say, as far as what we've been doing recently in terms of looking at the proofs of the existence of God, he would just say, well, why are you doing it? Because you can't really, from these proofs, categorically prove that God exists. That's what he would say. And in that sense, he's going against the teaching of the church, because the church is saying, yes, these proofs do prove the existence of God. That we can come to a certainty about God. So, in that sense, Pascal is a bit against the teaching of the church. But that doesn't cancel out what he's trying to say to us, which is very good and is very powerful. So I'm telling it to you, very powerful in terms of speaking to modern day pagans. So for him, the best way out of this tragedy is to passionately seek for the truth, which he says we don't find in the heart, in the head, by working out proofs of the existence of God, but in the heart. Pascal is the origin of that famous saying, the heart has reasons that the mind cannot understand. So that what he's saying there, that we behave from our heart in a way that often seems ludicrous to our mind. But he's not, and a lot of people say that in terms of, oh, well, I fall in love with somebody and, it's crazy, but the heart has reasons that the mind doesn't understand. Pascal isn't saying it in that sense at all. He's saying that the heart, at the center of the human person, is what motivates us to find God, not our mind, but our heart. Now, why is he so certain about this? He's certain about it as a result of a religious experience that he's very specific about the time and place that it happened, because he wrote it down as one of his pensées, one of his thoughts. And it happened on the 23rd of November, 1654, for 2 hours from 10:30 p.m. until 12:30 p.m. that night, going into the 24th of November. So that's when this happened. And in these 2 hours, God made Pascal experience him. He revealed himself to Pascal in a very powerful way. And Pascal describes it in one word: fire. And then he wrote in his book, in his thought, not the God of the philosophers of Plato and Aristotle that we try to come to an understanding of through philosophical proofs of the existence of God, as we've been doing over these last 2 weeks or so. Not that God, he said, but the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, revealed by Jesus Christ. And this God revealed himself to Pascal in this fire, this word, this one word he uses, fire. So we can't even imagine, what was going on in those 2 hours, but he said it was fire. God revealing himself to him in this dramatic way. The result was it gave him total certainty about the God of Jesus Christ. Heartfelt certainty, not certainty of the mind, but certainty from the heart. Gave him profound joy and profound peace. It made him weep tears of joy. Just imagine what it was like. This is, when we really look at it, this is far more powerful than these arguments for the existence of God we've been talking about, first cause, change, etc., because it's dealing with our heart. This is appealing to our heart. And he said it was all summed up in the phrase from St. John's Gospel, when St. John says, and this has Jesus say to us, and this is life eternal, that they might know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. It was that experience, his experience mirrored what St. John said in that line. And it was so powerful that what he wrote down about that night and those 2 hours, he kept sewn in a pocket in his jacket pocket next to his heart for the rest of his life. And it was even on his person when he died, and his friends found it when they began to deal with his corpse and read it then. And it's because of this experience, this religious experience he had, that Pascal thinks it is not the best way to get someone to faith in God via these proofs for his existence, using philosophical arguments, first cause, change, morality, etc. The best way is to make this wager, this bet, get them to bet. And the bet is this: we often make bets, and we can do so on God as well. It sounds a bit blasphemous to do so and disrespectful, but that's what Pascal wants us to do. And we bet on there being, as Christians, we bet on there being God when there might not be a God. Because we can't see God, can't feel him, can't touch him, can't hear him. But we bet on there being a God when there might not be a God, which is my position. But we can also bet on there not being a God when God might exist after all. And that's the position of the agnostic or the atheist, your friend who doesn't believe in God. That's their position. They're saying, I bet God does not exist, and yet he might. So it's a 50% chance either way. Now, if I'm wrong and there is no God, I still lose nothing. I'm still alive. I still eat food like the atheist. I still have a good life like the atheist. But I avoid all sorts of pitfalls in terms of avoiding sin that he might not avoid. So even my life, whether there's a God or not, is probably better than his. But it's a 50% either way. Now, if someone was to say to you, there's a 50% chance of your child being cured from some disease that he has, would you take it or not? You would. I would. It's exactly the same with this. And Pascal is saying the wisest thing in the world is to bet on there being a God, even if there might not be a God. And it's the stupidest thing in the world to say there is no God when there is a God. In my position, I lose nothing. The atheist is set to lose everything if he's proved wrong. So this is Pascal's wager in a nutshell. And remember also that the God he's talking about is the Christian God that revealed himself to him on that night of the 23rd of November, 1654. Because the God of the philosophers is just the God in the heavens who doesn't have anything to do with us, and he just keeps everything going and doesn't offer salvation. But the Christian God that Jesus reveals to us rewards those who believe in him and punishes those who do not. This is the God that Pascal is talking about. So that's why I can say that it's a real wager. And the wager is dealing with this God that Christ has revealed to us. So to conclude, why is Pascal's wager more powerful than all these other proofs for the existence of God that we've been talking about? To bring somebody to God. It's more powerful, I would say, because it appeals to the modern person's, pagans, basic self-interest. All these pagans that surround us at present are very good at pursuing their self-interest, using everything, they use life to get the best out of it for themselves, getting good jobs and doing all the right thing, meeting the right people and getting as big a bite of the apple as they can before they die. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That's got to be the basic attitude of somebody who doesn't believe in God. You want to grab at what's going to be taken away from you at any time, and so they're very self-interested. This wager uses and appeals to that attitude. The proofs of the existence of God appeal to our reason, that they say, if these things are the case, there must be a God. The difference with this one is that Pascal is appealing to self-interest. It's in your interest to bet that there is a God, because then you gain everything if there is. And if there's not, you don't lose anything either. Just a rather selfish lifestyle and wine, women and song and all that sort of thing, which are not worth having anyway when it comes down to it, because when you get what you want, you don't want it. All that. So it is, I think, a very powerful argument to present to somebody who is in the position of saying, I don't believe there's a God. Well, if you do, and there is a God, you are going to lose everything and be punished forever and ever. If I'm right, I gain everything and will be with God forever and ever in happiness. It's clear to me which bet I've got to make, and that's Pascal's position. So I hope that is some help to you and gives you some idea about what Pascal's wager is. It's worth looking him up, and there's lots of stuff on the internet about it. So look up Blaise Pascal, read about him, and God bless you all. Talk to you next time, hopefully on Tuesday.
What's the second name? Pascal?
P-A-S. Sorry, the spelling is P-A-S-C-A-L. Pascal.
Thank you, Father John.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Father John. Yes, my dear brothers and sisters. So we started with our distressed situation, almost like abandoned situation, in the depths of the pain, panic, pain. We are looking at the Lord, and we see the sky. Father John brought that good news. The sky, the heavens glorify the God's good attributes. Sky celebrate the poetry of God's good deeds. Yes, Pascal's under the in the light of Pascal. Now, my dear brothers and sisters, tomorrow we have our great day. The Holy Mass starts sharp at 2:25. Try to be by quarter past. And one other thing, my dear brothers and sisters, try to avoid unnecessary talks or something like that. As Father John reminded you, it's distracting. Okay, we shall keep that diligence. We shall keep that glory of an international prayer service.